Wren Holloway was 20 years old, and the only thing in this world that truly belonged to her was a 12-year-old boy who had not spoken a full sentence since the morning their mother stopped breathing. She stood on the sagging porch of a house in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The kind of house where the paint had given up 2 winters ago and nobody had bothered to argue with it. The name tag from the diner was still pinned crooked to her chest. $41 sat folded in the back pocket of her jeans, wages and tips together from a 10-hour shift, and 30 of it was already spoken for. 30 went to Verna every Friday the way most of what Wren earned went to Verna. The rest was supposed to buy a refill on Silas's inhaler at the pharmacy on Main. She had not even gotten her coat off the hook by the door. Verna sat at the kitchen table with a man Wren had met exactly twice, a man named Dwight Pruitt, who wore a work jacket that looked new and drove a pickup that looked newer, and who had a way of looking at Silas like the boy was a piece of furniture somebody had left in a room he wanted to use. On the linoleum against
If this
the
is
wall
true,
sat a blue duffel bag.
everything we know
Wren
changes.
recognized the strap. It was
We have to
Silas's.
move quickly.
The kitchen smelled like cigarette smoke that had settled into the curtains years ago, and coffee that had been sitting on the burner since noon. The furnace kicked on somewhere under the floor, and then thought better of it and kicked back off. Down the hallway, thin and tinny, Wren could hear the little transistor radio their mother had kept on her bedside table for 30 years. The one Silas carried around now, like some children carry a stuffed animal. He had it turned down low, the way he always did, tuned to a gospel station out of Asheville that came in some nights and not others. "We need to talk," Verna said. She did not look up from her phone. Wren stayed by the door. She was very tired, and being tired in that house had taught her to be still. About what? About how this isn't working anymore. Verna finally set the phone face down on the table. She was 46 years old, and she had looked 46 for about 6 years now, wearing the kind of tiredness that had stopped being about sleep. Her eyes flicked to Dwight and back to Wren, and Wren understood in that half-second that whatever came next had been rehearsed at this table before she got home. "You're a grown woman, Wren. You have been a grown woman for 2 years. This was supposed to be temporary." "I pay you," Wren said. "Every Friday I pay you. You pay for groceries you eat. That is not the same as paying your way." The furnace ticked. Wren looked at the duffel bag on the floor. Blue strap. She looked at Silas's boots by the door, mud-caked laces frayed, sitting under her mother's old wool coat that still hung on the hook where her mother had left it a year ago. And she thought about a hospital room in a county so small, the hospital only had 1 floor, and about holding her mother's hand while her mother said the last clear sentence she was ever going to say to anyone. "Keep him close," her mother had told her. "Not safe. You can't promise safe. Close." "Where am I supposed to go?" Wren said, and it was not really a question. "You'll figure it out. Girls your age move out all the time." Verna picked at the edge of the tablecloth with a chipped fingernail. There it was, the whole thing laid flat on the table between them. And Verna could not quite make herself say it out loud, so Wren said it for her. "He stays. It is better for him. Better for the $400 a month." Dwight shifted his weight in his chair. The chair creaked. Wren did not look at him. "You watch your mouth," Dwight said. Wren still did not look at him. She looked at the duffel bag, and she looked at the blue strap, and she thought about her mother in that hospital bed, and she made her voice come out very level, the way she had learned to make it come out with drunks at the counter of the diner at 2 in the morning. "Silas," she called. "Get your boots on, bud." "He is not going anywhere," Verna said. "Silas, boots and your coat, now." She heard the little radio click off down the hall. That was the thing about her brother. He had not strung 4 words together since the funeral, but he heard everything, and he came when she called. He appeared in the doorway of the hall a moment later, in his socks 12 years old and small for it. Dark hair too long in his eyes, the transistor radio clutched against his chest with both hands, like a rabbit he had caught and was afraid of breaking. Verna stood up. Ren, I swear to God, you take that boy out of this house. That is custodial interference. That is a crime. I will call the sheriff. Then call him. Ren crouched down and started working Silas's cold feet into his boots. Her fingers moving fast and steady, even though her heart was going in her chest like a bird against a window. She kept her voice low, kept it for her brother. Tell him you put a 12-year-old's bag by the door in January, she said to the boots to the room. Tell him you kept his check. Tell him all of it. Nobody moved. Dwight looked at Werner. Werner looked at the door. And Ren understood in that second that the threat about the sheriff was hollow. That Werner did not want a deputy standing in this kitchen asking questions any more than Ren wanted to be here answering them. Because the check was the whole thing. The check had always been the whole thing, and a deputy would want to see the paperwork on that check. Ren stood up. She grabbed the duffel bag off the floor. She took her mother's heavy wool coat off the hook, the one that still smelled faintly of the drugstore perfume Merla Halloway had worn every day of her adult life, and she wrapped it around Silas's shoulders. Then, without thinking about it, she reached up to the closet shelf and took down a dented cookie tin with a faded picture of a winter village on the lid. The tin held everything that was left of her mother. Photographs, a nurse's aid pin, a pressed flower gone to brown dust, a few folded papers Ren had never had the strength to open. It went under her arm the way you would grab the one thing from a burning house without stopping to explain to yourself why. She put a hand on Silas's shoulder. We don't leave each other, she said. That is the one rule we've got, and we are keeping it. She walked her brother out the kitchen door into the cold, and she did not look back. She was almost to the porch steps when she heard Dwight say something in a low voice she was not meant to catch, and she caught it anyway. She know about the cabin. She stopped. For half a heartbeat, she stood on the porch with her hand on Silas's shoulder, and the wind moving in the pines behind the house, and she thought she had misheard. Werner said something back too quiet to make out, and Dwight said sharper, Well, does she or doesn't she? And Werner hissed, Shut your mouth. Dwight, she's right there. And then the kitchen door slammed shut behind them. Ren stood there in the cold with the words rattling around inside her head, like a coin in an empty can. The cabin. She had no idea what cabin. She had never in her life heard her mother mention a cabin. But something in Dwight's voice, some greedy little edge, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. Silas tugged on her sleeve. His face was white in the porch light. Come on, bud, she said. She made herself move. We are going. The car was a 15-year-old hatchback with a check engine light that had been on so long she had stopped seeing it. It started on the third try. The heater pushed out air that was barely warmer than the night, and the wipers smeared the first fat wet flakes of snow across the windshield instead of clearing them. Silas buckled himself into the passenger seat and held the radio in his lap and looked out the window at the house shrinking in the mirror. And he did not cry. She almost wished he would. We're okay, she told him. I've got a little money. We'll get a room at the motel out by the highway. Tomorrow I will figure out the rest. I always do, right? He did not answer. But he reached across the gap between the seats and hooked 2 fingers into the sleeve of her coat and held on, and she had to blink very hard and keep her eyes on the road. By the time they reached the edge of town, the snow had stopped being pretty. It came sideways now, caught in the headlights, the way ash comes out of a bonfire, and the whole world felt like it was rushing at the car. The motel sign was dark, not neon dark. The kind of dark that meant a sheet of plywood over the office window, and the parking lot drifted over clean. Ren sat idling at the empty driveway and did the math she was always doing. $41. A quarter tank of gas. The next motel was 30 miles up the county highway over the pass in a town called Boone that might as well have been on the moon. Her mother had a cousin somewhere on the other side of the pass, a woman named Marceline, who Merla had not spoken to in almost a decade, over something Ren had never fully understood. Blood was blood. Marceline would not throw a child out into a blizzard. Ren believed that when she thought it. That was the thing she would remember afterward. That at the start of the drive, she had still believed there was somebody on the other side of the mountain who would take them in. "Change of plans," she said. "We are going to Marceline's." Silas nodded without turning from the window. The county highway climbed out of town in long dark switchbacks with the pines crowding both shoulders. The plows had not been up. The snow on the road was untouched, deepening, and the little hatchback's tires hunted for grip on every turn. Wren slowed to a crawl. The heater gave up entirely somewhere around the 3rd mile and started blowing cold, and she turned it off so it would stop pretending. She reached over and pulled her mother's wool coat tighter around Silas. "Put your hands in the pockets," she said. "There's gloves in the left one." He obeyed. The dashboard fuel light came on a mile later, a small orange warning, and a few minutes after that the engine began to lose its mind. It surged and dropped, surged and dropped. Wren coaxed it up one more grade with both hands white on the wheel and her foot light on the gas, talking to it under her breath, the way her mother used to talk to a Sunday roast. And at the top of the rise, it shuddered, coughed twice, and quit. She steered the dead weight of it onto what she hoped was the shoulder. The car settled into the snow and went silent. The wipers stopped halfway across the glass. After the noise of the laboring engine, the quiet was enormous, and through it, under it, she could hear the wind in the trees, a low, steady roar like water in a distant river. She tried the key. The engine turned over and did not catch. She tried it again. Nothing but the click and grind of a starter with no fuel left to feed. "It's okay," she said, mostly to keep her own voice in the car. "It's okay. People drive this road. Somebody will come." But she knew the road, and she knew that on a night like this, nobody was driving it. The plows would not come until morning. The cold was already finding its way in through the floorboards and the doors. The temperature on her phone read 9 degrees before the screen warned her the battery was at 4%, and she shut it off to save it. They waited. 20 minutes, maybe 30. No headlights came over the rise behind them. None came down the road ahead. Silas had stopped shivering, which Wren knew from her single year of community college nursing classes was the wrong direction and not the right one. His face in the dark was pale and far away, and his breathing had picked up a thin wheeze underneath it. That tight whistling sound she had learned to hate. And she reached over and put her cold hand on his chest and felt the muscles under his coat working too hard. "Hey," she said. "Hey, look at me." His eyes found hers. "Where is your inhaler?" She knew the answer before he shook his head. The inhaler was on the nightstand at Verna's house. Verna's house, where her prescription had run out 3 weeks ago because Wren had not had the $22 to refill it. And tonight she had walked in with the money in her pocket and walked out with none of it in her hand. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we are okay. Slow breaths. Look at me. Slow." She unbuckled him and pulled him against her chest across the console, and she made her own breathing loud and even, the way her mother had done for him when he was small, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, and after a long minute, the whistle in his chest eased down. Not gone, but eased. And he leaned his head against her shoulder, and she felt him try very hard to be brave. "We can't stay in the car," she said. "The car is not warm anymore. We have to walk back down to that farmhouse we passed. Little house with the porch light. Remember?" He nodded against her collarbone. She did not tell him it was a couple of miles. She did not tell him it was uphill behind them, that the snow was already past her boot tops, that a 12-year-old with a tight chest was not going to make 2 miles in a blizzard. She only needed a number small enough to start with. She wrapped her mother's coat around Silas on top of his own coat, so he was swallowed in wool to his knees, and she took the thin grocery store jacket for herself. She slid the cookie tin into the duffel bag and slung the whole thing across her body. Then she got them both out of the car and into the storm. The wind hit her like a wall. It took her breath and the warmth of her face in one motion. She got an arm around Silas, and they put their backs to the worst of it and started down the road into the dark, away from the dead car and the last porch light of the world. She did not see where the dog came from. One moment there was nothing ahead of them but blowing snow and the black edge of the trees. And the next, A shape was there on the shoulder, low and gray, and watching. Wren stopped so fast Silas stumbled into her. Her first thought was wolf, and her hand closed hard on her brother's arm. It was not a wolf, it was a dog. Big and rough-coated gray, going to white at the muzzle, one ear torn down to a notch. It stood in the road favoring a front leg, and it looked at them with a steadiness that was not afraid and was not aggressive, and it did not bark. It just looked at them the way you look at somebody you have been waiting on. Easy, Wren breathed. Easy now. The dog turned and took a few limping steps off the road into the trees, and then stopped and looked back at them. When they did not move, it came back, circled once at the edge of the pines, and went again. Stopped, looked back. "It wants us to follow it," Silas said. His voice was small and hoarse from the cold, but it was his voice, and it was the most words her brother had put together in a row since a rainy Tuesday in March, when they had buried their mother in a plot she had paid for herself in $3 installments over a decade. Wren felt something break open in her chest and did not dare look at him, did not dare make anything of it. Because if she turned toward her brother's voice too fast, this whole last year had taught her, it would go back inside him like a deer into trees. She did not have it in her to weigh a stray dog's intentions against the open road behind her. The miles, the cold that was already in Silas's blood. The farmhouse with the porch light was a long way back the way they had come. The dog was right here, and it was sure of something, and sure was more than she had. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we follow the dog." They left the road under the trees. The wind dropped at once, broken up by the trunks, and the snow came down softer and straighter through the branches overhead. The dog stayed just ahead of them, a gray smudge in the dark, waiting whenever they fell behind. The ground climbed and then leveled. Wren's feet had stopped hurting, which frightened her more than the pain had. She kept Silas moving by talking a steady stream of nothing. "You're doing good, almost there. Lift your feet, good." Until the words ran together, and she was not sure anymore which of them she was holding up. The trees thinned. The dog trotted ahead with new purpose, and the dark in front of them opened into a clearing, a wide flat pan of unbroken snow with the black shoulders of the mountains beyond it. And in the middle of the clearing stood a cabin. It was small and low-built of squared logs gone silver with age, the roof humped under 2 winters of snow. No light in it, no smoke from the stone chimney. It had the stillness of a place no one had touched in a long time. But there was a porch and a door and walls, and to Wren in that moment it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "There," she said. "Silas, look, there." The dog was already on the porch, scratching at the door. Wren half carried her brother across the clearing and up the 2 wooden steps. She tried the latch with fingers she could barely feel. The door was not locked. It swung inward with a groan of cold hinges, and she pushed Silas through ahead of her and pulled the door shut behind them against the wind. The sudden absence of that wind made the silence ring. It was black inside and only a few degrees warmer, but it was out of the weather, and that alone felt like rescue. She got her phone out and turned it on long enough to use the light. The thin beam swung across a single room, a cast-iron wood stove squatting in the corner on a slab of stone, a table and 2 chairs, a bed against the far wall, the blankets folded square at the foot, shelves everywhere, shelves lined with cans and jars and the dull shapes of tools, a wood box beside the stove, full to the top with split dry wood, and a tin of matches sitting on the warming shelf, like somebody had set them there on purpose for whoever came next. Wren did not stop to wonder about it, not then. That would come later. Right now, her hands knew what to do without her. She built a fire in the cold stove the way her mother had taught her at a state park campground when she was 8 years old. Bark and shavings and the small pieces first, and when it caught and the kindling crackled, and the first real heat pushed out into the dark, she nearly sat down in it. She got Silas out of his wet boots and wrapped in the bed's blankets in front of the open stove door. She held a hand over his chest until she was sure the whistle was gone. Color started to come back into his face. The dog had come in with them, and stood shaking the snow off her rough coat. And then she crossed the room, sure of every step in the dark, and she did not lie down on the floor by the stove. She jumped up onto a low wooden chair beside it, a chair with a worn cushion and a groove in the seat, the exact shape of a dog, and she curled into it with her chin on the armrest, settling into the one place in the world she had lain 10,000 times before. Wren went very still, watching her. She lifted her phone and let the light travel slowly over the room, again really looking this time. The cans on the shelves had labels. The blankets were clean. On the workbench under the window beside a row of small carving chisels laid out in size order, there was a coffee can, and the coffee can was full of folded dollar bills. And gouged into the wood of the workbench, in deep clean letters worn smooth by years of a palm passing over them, was a single name. Rennick. She said it under her breath once. Rennick. And the name just hung there in the cold room and told her nothing at all. She let it go. A name carved into a bench was a problem for a warmer hour. Her brother was a problem for right now. She fed the stove until it roared, and the iron of it ticked and pinged with the heat, and the room came up slow from black to a deep orange glow. Shapes she had only guessed at became real. A braided rug worn through to the backing, a heavy canvas coat on a peg by the door a man's size, a shelf of books with cracked spines above the bed, a kerosene lamp on the table with a full reservoir, and a wick trimmed clean. She lit the lamp, and the steady gold of it was easier on the eyes than the stove's flicker. She melted snow in a dented pot on the stovetop, scooping it from a drift just outside the door. And when it was warm, she made Silas drink it in small sips. She found the food on the shelves and could not believe it. Cans of beans and corn and peaches, labels faded, but seams clean. A sack of rice gone hard but good. A tin of crackers. Coffee in a jar. Somebody had stocked this place for a winter, and then the winter had come and gone and come again, and the food had simply waited. She opened the peaches first because they were sweet, and Silas needed the sugar. He ate them with his fingers out of the can, sitting wrapped in the blankets with his back against the warm stones under the stove, and he watched her the whole time over the rim of the can with his two enormous eyes. "Good?" she asked. He nodded. "There's more. We're not going anywhere tonight." The old dog watched the peaches too. So Wren spooned beans into a chipped bowl and set it down on the floor, and the animal climbed stiffly out of her chair and ate without hurry, and then went back to the chair and lay down again with a groan that sounded almost human. That was when Wren noticed the leg. The dog had favored a front paw out on the road. In the firelight, she could see the foreleg was swollen above the pad, the fur there matted and dark. She crossed the room slow and low and let the dog smell the back of her hand the way her mother had taught her with strange animals. And the dog leaned her big gray head into her palm and sighed. "Okay," Wren murmured. "Okay, let me see." She had spent a year learning how to be gentle with bodies that hurt. The leg was not broken. A deep cut along the pad, swollen and angry, but not yet rotten. She warmed more snow, cleaned it with the hem of her own shirt, and bound it with a strip torn from a flour sack towel she found folded on a shelf. The dog let her do all of it without a sound, watching her face the entire time. "You led us here," Wren told her quietly. "I don't know how you knew, but you did. So we're square. I fix your leg. You keep my brother warm. Deal." "Her name's Willa," Silas said. Wren did not look up from the bandage. "If you turn too fast toward the sound of your brother's voice," she had learned this winter, "it goes back inside him." "Yeah," she said to the dog's leg. "How do you figure that?" "She just is. Then we'll call her Willa." She tied off the bandage. The dog's torn ear twitched at the sound of the name once, like something remembered from a long way off. "She likes it," Silas said. "Look, she likes it." Her brother almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a smile she had seen on his face since the hospital, and she had to busy herself feeding the stove again so he would not see what it did to her. They were warm now and fed and out of the wind. The storm threw itself against the little cabin and did not let up. And inside, the open door of the stove held its glow against all of it. Wren sat down on the floor with her back against the bed frame and let herself feel for the first time since the kitchen that they were not going to die tonight. Silas had moved without her noticing. He had dragged a blanket over beside Willa's chair and built himself a nest on the floor there, one hand up and resting in the dog's rough fur, and the old dog had let him. The two of them lay in the stove light, the grey dog and the quiet boy. And Wren watched her brother's thumb move slow through Willa's coat. It had been months since she had seen him want to touch anything at all. "You can sleep," she told him. "I'll keep the fire. Wake me if she needs water," Silas said. He meant the dog. Wren said she would, and he closed his eyes. She did not sleep much. She fed the stove through the night, dozing against the bed frame, waking to push another piece of wood in. And with light to see by now, she walked the room slow. And the more she looked, the stranger it got. The bed was made, not abandoned made. Made the way a man makes a bed when he means to come back to it. Square-cornered and clean under a wool blanket, the pillow plumped. The reading glasses on the little shelf by the pillow were folded and set on top of a worn black Bible with a green ribbon marking a place. There was a calendar on the wall from 2 winters back, and somebody had crossed off the days in pencil right up to a Tuesday in late November, and then never crossed off another one. She understood standing there in that quiet orange light that nobody had walked out of this cabin, meaning never to come back. Whoever had lived here had stepped out on an ordinary morning, and the ordinary morning had not brought him home. "Silas," she said softly, though her brother was asleep and could not hear her. Whoever lived here, he didn't leave the way people leave a place they're done with. On the workbench under the window beside the row of small chisels laid in size order, there was a row of little carvings set on the sill. Animals. A bear no bigger than her thumb. An owl wings tucked. A running dog with one ear notched down, and she did not have to look twice to know which dog it was. She picked up the carved dog and turned it in the lamplight. Whoever had made it had loved the animal. You could see it in the work. On the shelf by the stove among the cans, there was a tin mug with a name painted on the side in white that had mostly chipped away. She tilted it to the window. "Amos," it said in the same careful hand that had carved the name into the bench. Amos. A man named Amos Rennick had lived in this cabin alone but for a dog, and he had carved small animals and read his Bible by a kerosene lamp and crossed off the days on a calendar until one Tuesday in November 2 winters ago when he stopped. She took the Bible down from the shelf. It fell open to the place the green ribbon held, and a photograph slid out into her lap. It was old, the colors gone soft and yellow. A young man with a wide, easy grin stood with his arm around a young woman on a lawn somewhere in summer, and the woman held a baby against her shoulder. The man was tall and lean and dark-haired, and Wren knew his eyes before she knew anything else about him, because they were the eyes of the man who had painted his own name on his coffee mug. Young Amos when he had everything. She turned the photograph over. On the back in the careful slanted hand was a year-long past and 4 words, "My whole heart gone." Wren sat with that for a long time. A wife and a child in a photograph kept inside a Bible by an old man who had died alone in the pines. Something had happened to the 2 girls in the picture, and whatever it was had emptied this man out, and it had left him here at the end of a logging road with a dog and a knife and a shelf of small wooden animals. She looked over at her brother, asleep on the floor with his hand still in the fur of a stranger's dog. She looked at the coat on the peg, at the calendar frozen on a Tuesday in November. She thought of Dwight Pruitt's voice in the kitchen doorway. She knew about the cabin. Outside the window, the snow had stopped falling, and the world had gone hard and blue in the first light. And Wren Holloway sat with a dead man's photograph in her lap, and a dead man's dog asleep beside her 12-year-old brother. And for the first time, she let herself ask it out loud into the empty room. "Who were you?" she whispered. "And why has your house been waiting for us?" Morning came without sound. Wren woke to the smell of cold ash under warm iron, and to a square of blue light on the plank floor, where the window used to be dark. The stove had burned down to a bed of coals the color of a healing bruise. Silas was still asleep on his blanket beside Willa's chair, one hand up in the dog's rough coat. Willa's eyes were open. She had been watching the door. Wren pushed herself up. Her back ached from the bed frame. Her feet, when they touched the floor, ached in a way that told her she had come very close last night to losing something she would not have gotten back. She fed the stove. She stood at the window with her arms crossed and looked out at the clearing. The world was drowned in white, deep, unbroken, glittering. The pines bowed under the weight of it. The 3 tracks they had punched coming in last night were already softened over into faint dents in the snow, and past those out where the road would be, there was no road at all. Only the humped shape of what she thought might be the hatchback a long way off through the trees buried to the windows. They were not going anywhere, not today, maybe not for days. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, with the stove warm at her back and the food on the shelves, and her brother breathing slow and easy under the blanket, the knot that had lived in her chest for a year finally let go. She stood there in a dead man's cabin with her cold hands on her own elbows, and she felt safe, and it undid her a little. That safe was such a strange feeling she almost did not recognize it. She made coffee in the green enamel pot because it felt like the thing a person did in a home. She sat at the table and drank it while Silas slept, and she let herself look at the cabin in daylight. It was the work of careful hands. The shelves were hand-built and fitted tight. Along the workbench under the window, the small chisels were laid out by size largest on the left, smallest on the right, and a leather strop hung from a hook above them, oiled and soft. In the corner by the door stood a pair of snowshoes and a walking stick that had been sanded smooth on the grip end from years of a man's hand. On the peg beside the canvas coat hung a wool cap, dark green, with a red tag she recognized as Forest Service issue from the years her mother had worked the county home. Somebody had been careful of this place. Not just once, for a long time. She pulled the canvas coat off the peg because it was there, and hers was too thin, and she put it on. It fell almost to her knees. It smelled of pine sap and old wood smoke and a soap she could not name. She rolled the cuffs up to her wrists and she went outside. The cold took her breath. She waded out onto the porch, and the porch boards moaned under her boots. Behind the cabin, she found a lean-to woodshed stacked to the rafters. 2 cords at least, split and seasoned and dry. A hand pump stood by the door with a galvanized bucket hung on it. There was an outhouse a discreet distance back in the trees, and a small smokehouse and a root cellar with a slanted door, and every one of them had been built square and kept up. This was not the leavings of a man who had given up. Everywhere she looked was the work of somebody who had risen each morning and done the labor of staying alive on purpose alone for years, and had laid in far more than one man could ever use, like he was keeping house for company that had not come yet. She climbed a little rise at the edge of the trees and looked back for the road. She could not even find the cut of it under the snow. The understanding should have closed her throat. Instead, she stood there in the dead man's coat in the enormous white quiet, and for reasons she could not have put into words, she was not afraid. When she came back in, Silas was awake. He was sitting on the blanket, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand, and Willa had her chin on his knee, and the boy looked around the warm, bright room in the daylight, the way a child looks around a place he has heard about in a story and always half believed in. "Hey, bud, where are we?" 2 words. She kept her face even. "In a cabin, in the woods off the pass road. We got here last night. Do you remember?" He thought about it. The dog. Willa. He nodded. She gave him coffee with too much sugar in it, which their mother never would have allowed, and which made him almost cheerful. And they ate crackers from the tin and the last of the peaches out of the can, and Wren told him what she knew. "A man named Amos lived here. He isn't here anymore." Did he die? The plainness of it. Children asked the question, grown-ups walked around. "I think he did a while ago." Silas looked at the made bed and the folded reading glasses and the mug with the chipped name. He did not seem afraid. If anything, he seemed to settle a little the way he had settled last night when he decided the dog was a girl. "He left us his food," he said. "He did. That was nice of him. It was the most words her brother had given her in one sitting in a year, and Wren had to turn to the stove again and pretend the fire needed her. He drifted over to the workbench while she cleaned the pot. She watched him out of the corner of her eye without letting him see her watching. He picked up one of the small chisels and turned it in his fingers. He set it back down exactly where he had picked it up from in its slot in the size order. He looked up at the row of little carved animals on the sill and put a fingertip on the running dog with the notched ear very lightly, as if it might feel him. "Careful, Bud," she said. I know. He did know. He had always been careful with things that were made. Even as a very small boy, he had wanted to take the toaster apart to see what it did, and their mother had let him, and it had gone back together too. That part of him had folded up small this last year. She could feel it in the way he stood at that bench, wanting to open. Around noon, she found the flour, and she made drop biscuits in a black skillet on top of the stove because she needed to be doing something with her hands. Silas asked if he could try to fix the hand pump, and she said yes because the alternative was that he sat and thought too long. And by mid-afternoon, he had disassembled the head of the pump on the kitchen table and was working oil into it from a can he had found in a drawer, his tongue between his teeth. Willa had moved to lie under the table with her chin on his foot. He talked to the dog while he worked, and the words came a little easier every hour. Wren let him have it. She sat at the other end of the table, and at last she pulled the cookie tin out of the duffel bag. She had grabbed it off the closet shelf without thinking. She had carried it through a dead car and a blizzard and 2 miles of pines, and she had not once opened it. She had not been able to. Inside it was the last of her mother, and there had not been a single hour in the last year when she'd had the strength to spare for it. She had the hour now. She pried off the lid. The smell came up first. The drugstore perfume, faint and sweet, and it took the legs out from under her for a moment. She pressed her hand flat over her mouth and breathed until she could see straight again. Then she went through it slow. Photographs. Her mother young before either of them, laughing at somebody outside the frame. The 4 of them at a lake the one summer their father was still around. Silas as a baby with a spoon halfway to his mouth. Wren in a paper graduation cap from the 8th grade. A nurse's aid pin gold-colored the clasp bent. A pressed flower gone to brown dust. A child's drawing of a house with too many windows. And under all of it, folded in quarters and soft at the creases from being unfolded and read and folded again, a single sheet of lined paper. Wren opened it. The handwriting was a man's, careful and slanted, pressed hard into the page. "Dear Merla." Wren read the first line, and her coffee went cold in her hand. And the wind that had quit hours ago seemed to come back up just to fill the silence in the room. She read it once through to herself. Then she read it out loud because she could not hold the weight of it alone. "Dear Merla, you won't remember me, but I am the man you fed the night I decided not to need feeding anymore." Silas set the piece of the pump down. "You came out the back of that diner over in Marion on the coldest night that winter, and you didn't just hand me a plate through the door. You sat down on the step next to me in your apron with the cold coming right through it, and you asked me my name, and you waited for the answer like it mattered. I had walked to that diner, meaning to eat one warm meal, and then go on over to the trestle bridge and not come back down. I want you to know that. I want you to know that you sat down on a cold step, and you asked me my name, and that is why I came down." Wren stopped. She had to. Silas had come around the table. He climbed onto the bench beside her without a word and leaned against her side. "Read the rest," he said. She read the rest. Amos wrote that he had tried to put more of it on the page and then crossed most of it out, and Wren could just see the ghosts of what was under the pencil. A wife, a little girl, a house, a fire in the night. He had lost all of it at once a long time before, and he had been carrying the ash of it from town to town until a tired woman had sat down beside him on a cold step and asked his name. "I'm writing this from a porch I built with these hands," he wrote. "On 40 acres I will never deserve, with a good dog asleep at my feet and a fire going against the cold. I got my whole life back. You handed it back to me and you never even knew you'd done it. I went looking for you to say so, and the diner had closed, and you had moved on, and I lost the thread. So I'm putting it down here in case it ever finds you." The next lines read slower. "There is a place in the pines off the old pass road above Linville. The door is never locked. If you or your girl ever have nowhere else in this world to go, you go there, and you stay as long as you need. It is yours. It was always going to be yours." At the bottom, in the same careful hand, he had signed it. "Your friend Amos Rennick." Ren set the page down on the table and put both hands flat on either side of it and did not move for a long time. Her mother had kept this letter folded in a cookie tin for more than 10 years. She had never spent it, through every shut of notice. Every winter they had run the oven with the door open for heat. Every month Merla had come home from a double shift at the county home too tired to eat and made them eat first. She had known there was a cabin in the pines with the door unlocked and her name on it, and she had never once come. Maybe she had thought she had no right. Maybe she had been saving it the way you save the one good thing for a day so bad you cannot imagine it yet. And then she had died without telling either of her children it existed. But here they were. A dog nobody owned had walked out of a blizzard and led 2 thrown-away kids straight to the one unlocked door in the world that had been waiting for them since before Silas was born. "He meant us," Silas said, very quietly. "When he said your girl, he didn't even know about me yet, but he meant us." "He meant us," Ren said. "So it's not stealing, being here." She put her arm around him. "No, Bud, it's the opposite of stealing. We are exactly where we are supposed to be." That night, when Silas had crawled back into the blanket by the stove, and Willa had folded herself around him in a way she seemed to have decided was now her job, Ren took the row of cheap notebooks down off the shelf above the bed. There were 12 of them, the years marked on the spines in the same careful hand as the mug and the letter. She started with the oldest, and she read them by the lamp at the table while her brother slept. They were not full of feelings. Amos had not been that kind of man on paper. The entries were short and dry. The weather, how much wood was split, what the dog flushed out of the brush, a bad hip, a good batch of jerky. But threaded all through the plain accounting of a quiet life like a single-colored thread run through grey cloth was the other thing. Thought about M today, hope she's warm. Drove into Marion, asked around about the diner that used to be on 226. Closed years back. Nobody knew where the girl who waited tables went. Got a last name finally, Holloway. Going to keep at it. And then a few notebooks on an entry with no weather and no wood count, only 6 words pressed so hard they had nearly torn through the page. Found her. Too late. She's gone. Ren had to set the notebook down and walk to the window and stand in the dark until she could breathe right. He had found her mother. He had spent more than 10 years looking, and he had found her at last. And what he had found was that she had already died. The dates lined up close enough that Ren understood the old man and her mother had likely gone within a season of each other. 2 people who had saved each other once and never got to know it had taken. The later entries changed after that. He got organized. He wrote about a lawyer in town. He wrote about papers. He wrote about a will. She had kids, one read. A girl and a boy, the county says, but they've been moved around. The trail is cold and the lawyer says I can't leave it to children I can't name in front of a judge. So we'll do it the other way. Everything to Merla Holloway's children by description, and let the law sort the names out when they turn up, if they turn up. A girl like that raised kids who land on their feet. And near the end, when the hand that wrote it had gone shaky, when the entries were mostly about being tired, and about a cough that would not quit, one line underlined once. If I go before they come, Harlan knows the whole of it. Harlan will keep the place up and the woodbox full. Harlan will keep a light on. I trust that man with the only thing I have left to give, which is a warm room for somebody who needs one. Harlan. She said the name to the empty cabin. She did not know who Harlan was, but the old man had trusted him with everything. And so, without ever having met him, she found she was ready to trust him too. That was the 2nd day. The 3rd day, the wind came down off the ridge in gusts that shook the stovepipe, and Silas woke around 3 in the morning with his chest closed up tight. She heard him first as a sound in the dark that was not sleep, a tight, thin wheeze and then a wet catch at the top of it. She was off the floor before her brain had caught up, kneeling on the blanket beside him, with her hands finding his shoulders. His eyes were open and too wide. Willa was already sitting up. Hey, look at me. Slow, slow. He could not slow. His chest worked in a way she had come to hate over the last 4 years. The muscles between his ribs pulling in with every breath, his lips going a color she would not name to herself. She was on her feet. She had the black skillet off the stove and was scooping snow into it before she had made a plan. She set it back on the iron top and shoved it over the hottest place, and she wet a dish towel in the drinking bucket and folded it. And when the snow melted and the water began to steam, she held the towel over the steam until it was hot and wrung it out and brought it to him. Breathe this, Sakis, she said. She held it under his chin. In through your nose, slow, like Mom used to, in, out, in. She sat behind him and pulled his back against her chest and made her own chest go up and down slow, so his had somebody to keep time with. Willa had climbed down from her chair and pressed her weight against Silas's leg and stayed pressed there, an old, warm, patient anchor. Wren sang the hymn her mother used to sing. She had not sung it in a year. It came out cracked and awful, and she did not stop. Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Silas's fists closed on her sleeves. She kept singing. Streams of mercy never ceasing call for songs of loudest praise. She could feel minute by minute the whistle in his chest come down. She could feel his ribs stop pulling so hard. His fists loosened. His head sagged back against her collarbone. Willa made a low sound in her throat that was not quite a whine and not quite anything else. When his breathing was almost normal, Silas said very small, I'm sorry. Don't you dare. I lost the inhaler. You didn't lose it. Verna kept it. He was quiet a long time. Wren. Yeah, bud. I don't want to go back. She held him tighter. She had already known she was going to have to fight for him. She had known it in the kitchen with the duffel bag on the floor. But that fight had felt like a thing that might come at her in a few days or a few weeks when the roads cleared. Sitting on that plank floor in the dark with her 12-year-old brother's heartbeat under her hand, she understood that the fight had started the moment Verna put a bag by the door, and she was already in it. And she was going to have to win. You are not going back, she said. I promise you that. Willa's ears came up. There was a sound outside. Wren went still. It was not the wind. The wind she had been listening to all night and knew. This was under the wind, and it was a wrong sound. An animal sound that was not any animal. And when it came again, she recognized it and did not want to. Boots in snow. Somebody was walking slow and heavy up the buried spur toward the cabin. She eased Silas down off her lap and laid him back on the blanket. She put her finger against her lips. He nodded. Willa was already on her feet. Wren crossed to the window and leaned to the corner of the glass and looked out. The moon had come up over the ridge behind the cabin at some point, and the clearing was pale enough to see across. A figure was coming out of the trees. It was on foot. It was tall. It had a rifle across its shoulder in one gloved hand, and a wool cap pulled low, and it was moving with the deliberate slow patience of a man who had walked a long way in a bad direction on purpose. It stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked at the cabin, and she saw the shape of the head tilt, taking in the smoke from the chimney, and then it started forward again. She knew that walk. She had watched it come across the parking lot of the diner in a work jacket the week before. She had watched it come up the porch steps of Verna Tackett's house every Sunday for a month. Dwight Pruitt. Wren stepped back from the window and stood very still in the dark, warm room. Silas was watching her with his eyes huge over the top of the blanket. Willa was between them and the door, silent, the ridge of fur along her spine standing up like a rake. He had walked. He had walked in from wherever he had left his truck, and he had walked in the dark, and he had walked up an unbroken buried spur road he could only have known about from Verna's kitchen, and he had brought a rifle. Wren's eyes went to the cabinet against the wall, the one she had noticed her first morning and left alone. The tall, narrow one with the small brass keyhole under the shelf of books. She crossed to it and her hand was steady because it had to be. The little brass key was where a careful man always leaves the key to something he needs to be able to reach in the dark. Right on top of the cabinet, pushed back against the wall, she turned it in the lock. Inside on a rack, oiled and clean and set upright like it was still waiting to be useful, was a shotgun. On the shelf below the rack sat a small green box of shells. Wren Holloway stood in a dead man's cabin at 4 in the morning with a sick 12-year-old boy behind her and a strange dog at her knee, and she reached in and took the shotgun down. She loaded 2 shells with the hands she made steady because she had to. The little green box on the shelf was heavy in her palm, and the shells were bright red and cold. She had never loaded a shotgun in her life. She had watched her mother's brother do it once a long time ago at a farm outside Marion, before he had gone to Alaska and not come back. She remembered the sound of the break. She broke the shotgun over her arm the way she remembered him doing it. She fed a shell into each barrel. She snapped it closed. She did not know if it worked. She had to look like she knew. Silas was watching her from the blanket. She crossed to him and knelt. "Listen to me, bud. There's a man coming up the road. He is not a good man. I want you to go under the bed with Willa. You don't come out until I say, no matter what you hear." "Is it Dwight?" "Yeah. He has a gun." "So do I." Silas looked at the shotgun. Then he looked at her face, and she watched him decide something inside himself that was too old for him. He nodded once, and he crawled off the blanket and under the bed frame without a sound. Willa did not need telling. She went low and quiet as a shadow and slid in after him, and Wren pulled the wool blanket down off the mattress so it hung to the floor and hid them. She stood up. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the latch, and she made herself breathe slow once, twice, and then she pulled the door open just far enough to stand in the frame with the shotgun broken back over her arm muzzle down. The way she remembered her uncle standing on that porch 100 years ago. Dwight Pruitt was 30 feet out walking up on the porch through the moon-blue snow. He stopped when he saw her. He was breathing hard. His face under the wool cap was raw from the wind. He had a hunting rifle across his shoulder on a strap, and he had one hand loose at his side, and he took her in standing there, in a dead man's coat with a broken shotgun over her arm. And he did the thing men like Dwight do when a thing does not go the way they pictured it. He smiled. "Look at you," he said. Wren did not answer. "That's a lot of gun for a diner, girl. You're on private property." "Am I?" He came another 2 steps up, slow, easy, the way you would walk up to a dog you were not sure of. "I walked 6 miles up that pass road in the dark, sweetheart. In this. My truck's snowed under back at the pull-off. So how about you set that thing down and let me in by the fire, and you and me can have a talk." "About what?" "About your Aunt Vanna, who's worried sick." "She isn't." Dwight's smile did not move, but the eyes changed. "About the boy, then." "He is not here." "That is a lie." "Then go back down and tell the deputy." He laughed. It was a small laugh, private, meant for himself. He shifted his weight, and she watched the hand at his side move a little closer to his hip and stop. "Look," he said. His voice went reasonable. "I know how this looks, but there's things you don't know about this place. About what your mama knew. Verna's been talking to me. There's papers. There's 40 acres up here. There's a man died 2 winters back, and he didn't have any kin, and the county is going to come take this land in the spring for back taxes if somebody don't stand up and claim it. Verna is that boy's legal guardian. She has the standing. She and we could get this squared away. Boy would come out of this with money in the bank for once in his life, instead of freezing in a squatter's shack with his big sister." There it was. Whatever last small piece of Wren had wanted to be wrong about this man went out of her. He had known about Amos Rennick before he had ever sat down at Verna's kitchen table. He had come sniffing around a woman drowning in debt because she had a boy on a state check, and a story somewhere back in her family about a cabin in the pines, and he had waited for the day the story got useful. He had walked 6 miles in a blizzard to stand on a porch and put his hand near his hip and call a 20-year-old girl sweetheart. She snapped the shotgun closed. The sound in the cold air was very clean. Dwight went still. "You take one more step," Wren said. Her voice came out level. "And I put a hole in you, and I drag you off this porch, and I let the cold do the rest. And when the deputy comes up in the spring, I tell him, a man walked up on my brother's home with a rifle in the middle of the night, and I do not think he is going to have any hard questions for me. You understand?" Dwight looked at her. He looked a long time. He looked at a 20-year-old girl in a dead man's coat with a shotgun she had loaded 10 minutes ago, and did not know how to fire. And something in his face understood that she did not need to know how to fire it. Some things you can see in a person. He saw it in her. He lifted the hand that had been near his hip. Slow, open. "Okay," he said. "Okay, sweetheart, okay." He took a step back, then another. He did not turn his back on the shotgun until he was 10 feet clear of the porch. Then he did turn, and he walked out across the moonlit clearing, the way he had come in. And he did not look back once, and when the pines closed behind him, she stood in the doorway and listened to his boots in the snow for a long time until the sound was gone. She lowered the shotgun. She locked the door. She sank down onto the floor in front of it, and only then she started shaking. "Wren!" Silas was under the bed still. His voice was very small. "It's okay," she said. "It's okay, bud. He's gone. Come out." The dog came first. Willa crossed the room and put her big head under Wren's hand and stayed there warm and heavy, and Silas came after and folded himself against her other side, and the three of them sat on the floor by the door until Wren could breathe right again. The sky went hard and blue by morning. The wind that had blown for 4 days quit at some point before dawn, like it had used itself up. And when Wren stepped out onto the porch with the shotgun still under her arm, the world had gone silent. The way it only goes silent after a storm, and somewhere far down the mountain, thin and mechanical and sweet as a hymn, she heard the long, slow scrape of a county plow working its way up the pass road. By afternoon, she heard something closer, a high snarling engine coming up the buried spur toward the clearing, and Willa was off her chair and at the door with her ragged ears up before Wren could move. A snowmobile broke out of the trees, throwing a rooster tail of powder, and slid to a stop in the middle of the clearing. The man who climbed off it was old, near 70, broad and slow in a faded Forest Service parka, with the patches picked off. He pulled his goggles down around his neck and stood looking at the smoke coming out of the chimney of a cabin that was not supposed to have any smoke coming out of it, and his weathered face was doing something complicated. Wren's stomach dropped. 4 days of feeling safe drained out of her between one breath and the next. She thought about the deputy Werner had threatened. She thought about custodial interference. She thought about how a grown woman with a kid in a dead man's cabin would look to anybody official. She put Silas behind her and opened the door a crack. "We are not hurting anything," she said. "We got caught in the storm. We will be gone soon as the road clears." The old man did not come closer. He looked at her and at the boy behind her, and then his eyes went down to the dog pushing out through the gap in the door, and the complicated thing on his face cracked wide open. "Well," he said softly, "there you are, girl. I thought the storm got you." Willa limped across the snow to him and shoved her head against his knee, and the man crouched down with a grunt and took her grizzled face in both gloved hands. "There you are," he said again, and his voice was not steady. He looked up at Wren, still braced in the doorway. "Name's Harlan," he said. "Harlan Fenwick. I look after this place. Have done for 2 winters since the man who owned it passed. I've been leaving food out at the shed 3 days running for that dog, and figured I'd lost her for good. She bring you in through that storm. She came out of nowhere," Wren said. "On the road. She wouldn't let us sit down. She led us straight here." Harlan was quiet a long moment. "Of course she did," he said. "It's the only home she's got. Same as it's been the only thing keeping me coming up this mountain. Somebody had to keep the light on." He got to his feet. His knees clicked. "You and the boy hungry. You are white as the snow, the both of you. How long you been up here?" She let him in. There was not a reason in the world to trust a stranger on a mountain, except a dead man's journal had said his name and the dog had walked straight to him. And sometimes that is all the proof a person gets. He stamped the snow off his boots in the doorway and stood in the warm room and turned slowly, taking it in the lit stove and the made bed and the cans down off the shelves. And Wren watched 2 winters of grief move across the old man's face. He would be glad, Harlan said roughly. Lord, he would be glad to see smoke in his chimney. He lowered himself into one of the table chairs. Willa settled against his leg. Amos Rennick, that was his name. Best man I ever knew and the loneliest. You'd have to look hard to find a soul who was both, but he managed it. I read his journals, Wren said. She sat down across from him. I hope that is all right. I was not snooping. I wanted to know who he was. Who left us all this? Who left me and my brother all this? Harlan's head came up. What do you mean, left you? She did not answer right away. She slid the folded letter across the table instead, the one from the cookie tin, and watched the old man dig a pair of reading glasses out of his parka pocket and bend over the page. His lips moved as he read. He got to the name at the bottom and went very still, the same stillness that had come over her at the workbench when she had first seen it carved there. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Merla, he said. Your mother's name was Merla, the diner girl, in Marion. Harlan took the glasses off. The one who sat down on the step. He talked about her till the day he died. 12 years I knew him, and there was not a month went by he did not bring her up. He looked from Wren to Silas and back, and something was building behind his face. He used to say a warm cabin's no good to a man with nobody to share it. So he kept it warm anyway, kept it stocked, kept it ready, every year, in case somebody came. His voice dropped. He never said it would be you two. He never knew your faces, but it was you he meant. It was always going to be you he meant. For a moment, none of them said anything. The stove popped. There's a thing you need to know, Harlan said. He leaned forward. Amos left a will, a proper will with a lawyer down in Linville by the name of Weatherby. Been sitting 2 years waiting on heirs nobody could find. Everything he had, the cabin and the 40 acres and a bit of money in a savings account. And what's in that coffee can there, all of it goes to Merla Holloway's children by description. The county was fixing to take this place at auction come April for back taxes. I have been paying what I could out of pocket to keep them off it, but I'm on a pension and I ran out of runway. Wren stared at him. You paid the taxes. Not all of them. I paid what I could. He looked away. He would have done it for me. Willa's head came up. She had been half asleep against his boot. Now she rose with a low sound in her chest and her notched ear swiveled toward the window. Harlan stopped talking, and then Wren heard it too under the wind. The grind of an engine in low gear, and through the dark glass she saw it far down where the spur met the pass road. A pair of headlights turning off the plowed highway and beginning to climb slow and deliberate straight up the mountain toward the cabin. The headlights climbed for a long 2 minutes. A county sport utility with chains on its tires pushed into the clearing and stopped beside Harlan's snowmobile. The engine cut. The driver's door stayed shut a moment while whoever was inside looked at the lit cabin. Wren's pulse went hard and high. She glanced back at Silas, small at the table, with a half-finished wooden dog in his hand, and she squared herself in the doorway. Because if anyone meant to come for her brother, they would have to come through her first. Easy, Harlan said quietly, getting to his feet. Let me talk some. I've known half the people in this county since they were in diapers. 2 people got out of the front. One was a sheriff's deputy in a heavy brown coat, young, his hand resting easy near his belt, but not on it. The other was a woman in a parka with a county lanyard around her neck and a canvas bag over her shoulder. And Wren knew before she said a word that this one was the dangerous one. The deputy could only arrest you. A woman with a county bag could take your brother. And then the back door of the SUV opened, and Verna Tackett climbed down into the snow. She looked smaller out here than she had in her own kitchen. The cold had gone straight through her thin town coat. She had her arms wrapped around herself, and when her eyes found Wren in the doorway, they slid away and would not come back. The deputy came up first. "Evening, Deputy Kilbride. We're looking for a Silas Halloway, 12 years old. We got a report he was removed from his guardian's home 4 nights ago, and a vehicle registered to a Wren Halloway turned up abandoned and snowed under on the pass road this afternoon." His eyes moved past her into the warm room and found Silas at the table. "That him? That's my brother," Wren said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The woman with the lanyard stepped up beside the deputy. "My name's Adele Thorne. I'm with County Family Services. I'm not here to scare anybody. I am here to make sure a 12-year-old is safe. Can we come in out of the cold and talk?" There was no version of saying no. Wren stepped back and let them in. The small warm cabin that had felt so much like rescue filled up with cold air and strangers and the dread of a room where somebody's about to decide your life for you. The caseworker took it in with a slow professional sweep, and Wren tried to see it through her eyes. The lead stove, the food down off the shelves, the made bed, a boy at the table with a carving knife and a half-finished wooden dog warm and fed and clean. A big old dog leaning against his chair. Whatever Adele Thorne had braced herself to find on the drive up, it was not this. "You've been here 4 days, she said. 3 nights and 4 days. We got snowed in the first night, and the road has been buried since." Wren's chin came up. The food, the wood, it was already here. The man who owned this place left it stocked. We did not take anything that was not given. Adele Thorne crouched a little, bringing herself down toward the boy. "Silas, can I ask you a couple things? You are not in any trouble, I promise." Silas looked at her and said nothing. "Are you warm enough up here? Getting enough to eat?" Still nothing. He set the carving knife down. He slid off his chair. He crossed the room and he stood pressed against Wren's side, and he took a fistful of her sleeve the same way he had in the car. Adele Thorne watched him do it and wrote something on her pad, and Wren could not tell whether the note helped them or hurt them. "He doesn't talk much," Wren said. "Not since our mom passed. He isn't being rude." "I can see that." Adele's voice gentled. "I can also see he knows exactly where he feels safe." Verna spoke from the doorway where she had stopped just inside, still hugging herself. "She took him in the middle of the night. I have been worried sick. I am his guardian. I have the papers, and she just took him out into a storm. Anything could have happened to him." The caseworker turned to her with a patience that had clearly been built over a long career. "Ma'am, I would like to hear the whole thing, from the start. You filed the report, walk me through that night." And there it was, the opening. Wren had spent 4 days too grateful to be warm to be angry. But the anger was still in her, banked like the stove, and it came up now clean and quiet. "Tell her about the bag," she said. Verna's eyes came up. "What?" "Tell her about the duffel bag you packed and put by the door before I even got home from my shift. Tell her you sat me down with your boyfriend at the table and told me to take my brother and get out." Wren kept her voice level because she had learned that the steady voice was the one people believed. "Tell her it was 9 degrees out. Tell her the motel was boarded up for the winter. Tell her what you said you would keep doing after we were gone. Tell her about the check." The room was very quiet. Adele Thorne had gone still. Her pen stopped over her pad. Verna's face crumpled and then hardened. The two things fighting. "You don't know what it's been like," she said. "Lonnie left me. Did you know that? Your uncle walked out in October and left me with his debts and his sister's 2 kids and a mortgage I can't carry. I am drowning. I have been drowning for a year." Her eyes were wet and furious. "And every month that check came, and it was the only thing keeping the lights on. I am not proud of it. But you were grown. You could work. He is 12. He comes with help attached. And you were just one more mouth I couldn't." She stopped. The thing she had been about to say hung in the air, and everyone heard it anyway. One more mouth you couldn't feed. Wren finished for her. So you kept the one the state pays for, and you put the other one out in the snow. The deputy looked at his boots. Adele Thorne closed her pad. She reached into her canvas bag and she took out a folder that was thicker than any folder she was carrying by accident. And she set it on the table. "Ma'am," she said, to Verna, "my office has been getting calls about your household for 3 months. From Silas's teacher at the middle school, from the school nurse, from a bus driver, a boy showing up hungry, a boy showing up in clothes that had not been washed, a boy who had stopped talking. We opened a case in October. I have been driving out to your street twice a month waiting for probable cause to knock." She tapped the folder. "The call you made 4 nights ago was that cause. I did not come up this mountain to take a child away from his sister, ma'am. I came up here because when a guardian reports a missing minor, we come. But I have been coming for you, Verna Tackett, not for her." Verna made a small sound. She sat down on the bench by the door. She put her face in her hands. Adele turned back to Wren. "I believe you," she said. "For what it is worth, I believe every word of it." Harlan cleared his throat. He had been standing by the stove the whole time, quiet, letting it play. Now he stepped forward and he reached into the chest of his parka and brought out a long envelope, soft and worn at the folds, like it had been carried a long while. "There is a reason these kids ended up at this exact cabin," he said. "And it isn't luck. And you all ought to hear it before anybody decides anything else tonight." He held the envelope out, not to the caseworker, to Wren. "Amos wrote this. He made me promise to keep it safe in case the day ever came. It's addressed to Merla Holloway's children. That's you too. He just didn't know your names." Wren's hands were not steady when she took it. She opened it and unfolded the single page, and she read it out loud into the silent room, because Harlan gave her a small nod that said she should. "To Merla's kids, you won't know me and that's all right. Your mother knew me for about 10 minutes one cold night, and it was enough to save a man's life, though she never found out it had. Your mother gave me a meal when I had nothing left, not even a reason to want one. I spent the rest of my life trying to be worth it. I could not ever pay her back because I could not find her. So I am doing the next best thing. Everything I've got. This cabin and the 40 acres and what little money's in the can and in the bank goes to her children. Whoever and wherever you are. There are papers with a lawyer in town that say so. It isn't much. It is a roof that is paid for in a quiet place with a full wood box. And if you are reading this, it means you found your way here. And I expect that means you needed it. So it is yours. Stay warm. Look after each other. That is the whole of what I learned in the end. Look after each other. And leave the door unlocked for the next one who is cold." She could not read the name at the bottom out loud. Silas read it for himself under her arm, his lips moving. He looked up at his sister. "He is like Mom," Silas said. "He did what Mom did. He did the same kind thing for her, and neither one of them ever got to know it." "They did," Wren said. "They did, Bud." Adele Thorne let out a very long breath. "All right," she said. "Here is what I can do tonight, and it is more than I usually can, so everyone in this room needs to listen. With a legal guardian present who is going to consent on the record to a kinship placement with the maternal sister, and with a responsible adult on this mountain, willing to keep an eye out. I can leave Silas with you tonight, Wren, instead of taking him in. That is not the end of it. There will be a home visit. There will be a hearing. There will be paperwork. And there will be a judge. And you will have to sit through all of it. But I have been doing this work 11 years, and I have learned to tell the difference between a child who is being held onto and a child who is being held. That boy is being held. I will write it the way I saw it." Wren tried to say thank you and could not make the words. She just nodded over and over while the tears she had been holding back for 4 days finally came. And Silas pressed his face into her side, and Harlan turned away to give them the moment and busied himself with the stove that did not need him. They left before full dark. Verna was the last out. She stopped in the doorway. She looked at Silas, and it was plain she wanted to say something to him and had no right to, and knew it. In the end, she did not try. She just said in a small voice, "Be good for your sister." And she went out to the county truck, and the headlights swung around the clearing and dropped away down the spur, and the three of them and the dog were alone again in the warm. The snow went off the high meadows late that year, and by the time it did, the cabin in the pines belonged to them in the eyes of the law. Wren used the first of it in the things a house needs. A working pump that did not have to be coaxed by a 12-year-old. A truck older than she was, glass for the windows of the truck. She paid the lawyer. She opened an account in her own name for the first time in her life.
When I was young, I chased the horizon. Certain peace
In the fall,
was
when the leaves
waiting there.
turned and the school
I
year
thought the
started,
storms were wrong
Silas
turns
got on a
taken,
bus at the bottom of the
and every
mountain
burden
and went
was
to the
unfair. So
He
I spent
came home
years
that first day
fighting the
talking
mountains, cursing
about a boy
every winding
who
road.
also liked to be
Never seeing that the
where they were
struggle
going to meet
was the
house
thing that made me grow.
the dog.
The eagle learns within the wind. The oak grows strong beneath
He talked
the
while he
snow.
did his homework at
And
the
every
table.
soul that's worth becoming must
Some nights,
walk where
Wren caught
all
herself
the paths
just
may
sitting
go.
and listening to the playing.
Was never meant to be easy. A storm was never meant to pass. The waves were not
Willa got
there to
fatter
stop me.
and slow and
They were
gray
there
to
to
the tip
teach
of her
me
nostril.
how to
She gave up
last.
roaming for good.
Trial is part
She
of
slept
the
in her
journey.
chair undisturbed and
Every
followed
scar
Silas to the bottom
becomes
of
a
the
guide. The mountain is not in my way. The
Harlan
mountain
came up
is the
most
reason
Sundays.
for
He taught
the
Silas to
climb.
swim and to He sat at the table and ate what the kitchen feed and told stories until the cabin fell.
I've known loss that left me broken. I've known fear that
Wren
stole
went
my
back to
breath.
school.
I've known
In January,
nights
the community
so
college
cold
let her
and
pick up the
endless.
nursing aid
I could barely take one step. Yet every wound
Verna lost the
became a
house that spring.
teacher. Every
Dwight had gone
failure
before
left
Christmas,
a mark.
and the chase
And
was
every valley that I walked through placed another star within the dark. The river doesn't fight
talk
the
about it.
canyon. It learns to carve its way ahead. What seems
She did not say
to
all.
those who fear it becomes
She
a
just wrote that
path for
Silas was
those who
doing well
tread.
and
The road was never meant to be
and that the door wasn't locked.
The storm was never meant to pass.
Verna
The
came
waves
up the
were not
mountain
there to
easily.
stop me. They were there
second
to
winter,
teach me how
the wind
to
came down
last. Every trial is part of the
Wren set the
journey.
kerosene.
Every scar becomes a guide. The mountain is not in my way. The
Around
mountain is the
midnight,
reason
a hunter who
for
had
the
lost
climb.
the road in the fire followed them slowly up to the pine and found him halfway to the door. He took him in. He felt him. He dried his coat and he said, "I don't know what I would have done."
One day I stopped asking, why me?
A man
And
named
started
Amos left the light
asking,
on.
what can I learn the
I am
moment
just
I embrace
hunter did not
fire?
understand
The fire lost its power
Some things
to
were just
burn. For every
Harlan was there that
challenge
night,
holds a
dozing in the
gift.
chair.
Though hidden from the
After the
eye,
hunter had
the
gone to sleep,
obstacle
wrapped in
and
blankets,
destination
the old man looked at the full warm
were
moon,
never
at the boy asleep
separate
with his
all
hand in an
this
old dog's
time.
fur.
The
At the young
road
woman
was
feeding
never
one more
meant
piece
to
of
be easy.
and he said the thing
Storm
right
was never meant to end. The battles were not sent to break me. They were sent to
He
shape
scratched
the
his
man I
Your
am. Every
blood
trial is part of the journey. Every loss becomes a light. The mountain is not
Real
in
family.
my way. The mountain is the reason I can
Wren did
rise.
She got up instead
When
and
the
went around the
thunder
room.
finds me again,
The way the old man
and dark clouds gather in the sky, I'll greet them like
She
old
checked the lamp
companions,
she filled the
because
wood box
they belong.
and then she trimmed the wick of the lamp and carried it to the window that looked out over the dark somebody was cold.